Welcome to the Inflection Podcast, where we explore the pivotal moments that have shaped us into who we are today. I am your host, Anabi, and I can't wait to dive into these moments with you. Let's get it.
We can chat without talking about remote work. First question, is remote work dead? It's 2023, it's October, we're getting into winter here shortly, it's fall. Is remote work dead from where you sit? Or is it dying? Maybe I should say.
Let me rephrase and say, yes, remote work is declining from pandemic level. Of course, the whole world was scared to go outside. So of course, when we were at our peak in, I don't know when it was, but I think Dr. Bloom has talked about this extensively. I think it was around 61% of the
Wow.
population was working remotely. That's really high.
Yeah.
But prior to that, it was only 4%. Prior to
Wow.
2020, it was only 4%. The news headlines, every article that you're reading, of course, they're all saying remote work is dead. I think there's some motivations behind that as well, but that's a different topic. But the reality of the situation is, yes, we're dropping in the number of people that are working remotely since the peak of the pandemic. That is a correct statement. But we are still, even at our lowest point, I think I just read an article recently and it said we're at our lowest point of working remotely since the pandemic started. I believe it was around 24, 25%. That
Wow.
is still 4 times the size of what it was prior to the pandemic. So is remote work dead? Hell no. I'm going to say, hell no, it ain't dead. It's not going anywhere. So it's not dead at all. What do you think, Anibi? Let's have this conversation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, from where I'm sitting and conversations I'm having, yes, concur. I see a decline in remote work. However, I think what I'm seeing more is a lot of people, there is a normalization of that, but a lot of people are finding out that hybrid, me included,
Mhm.
like it's not just binary 0 or 1, remote or in office, right? It's more so,
Yes.
I love working remotely. I love the flexibility, but it is
Mhm.
nice if I have the opportunity to go into an office or at least a co-working space, which is similar.
Yes.
You're going in somewhere to connect with folks. So that's something I'm
Mhm.
finding
Mhm.
for people who have the option. Obviously, there are some jobs that you have to be in office for, go for it. But for those who have the opportunity to
Mhm.
work remotely, I'm finding in my circles, more and more people saying, yeah, it's nice to have the flexibility and I love that, but it's also great to have the option to be able to go
Yes.
in somewhere, which
I
makes
think
sense.
I think you hit something that's really powerful. And I like the fact that you said it's not necessarily binary, fully remote or in office. I think the challenge, Anibi, is that hybrid didn't really exist before the pandemic, and it did. I think Dropbox was one of the few companies that kind of pushed hybrid before the pandemic.
Yeah.
But if you were to ask a few people, like, what is hybrid prior to 2020, most people would say a subset of employees go into the office every single day. And then a subset, they're fully remote, like the networking people, the developers, they're fully remote. So half are on site all the time or not, and a percentage is fully remote. Not this, we're going to come in a couple times a week. And so since the pandemic, the definition of hybrid is so muddy because the employees, we all say, oh, hybrid is going in to the office a maximum of 2 times per week.
Yeah.
And then you have leadership saying, no, hybrid is if you come into the office 4 times a week, which, by the way, it is not.
Yeah.
Hybrid is not going into the office 4 times a week. But back to your statement of option and choice,
Yeah.
that changes everything. And I think the true spirit, like when you talk about sports, like the spirit of the game, we can't break that. Baseball is a huge one. Oh, you can't flip the bat after you hit a home run because you're ruining the spirit of the game. Those are unwritten rules that you abide by.
Yeah.
In my opinion, hybrid, the true spirit of the updated definition of hybrid is choice. It's
I
choice.
like
It's
that.
not mandated. It's not required. And since most employees have experienced some sort of flexibility from the pandemic, it's the companies that are saying, look, we understand that it's not one size fits all. Some people need to go into the office. We have little ones and it was great for a little bit, but I got to get out of the house. I want to go see some people. So
Yeah.
you're 100%. I think the true spirit of hybrid is about choice. And that is where it becomes really magical and self-fulfilling and people really enjoying it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Along those lines, right? With companies that are trying to figure this out, like how do we do it? Obviously, there are good ways to do remote. There are crappy ways to do it that leaves a bad experience. And the company's like, oh, remote work doesn't work. Let's toss
Mhm.
it out. What are some things from your purview? What's a good way to really test this out? Let's say a company, they're new to the game, remote work. Hey, did
Mhm.
you get the
Mhm.
memo? And they're
Yeah.
trying to explore
Yes.
it, but they're weary of doing it a bad way. What are some certain things that come to mind? What's a good way for a company to test out remote work? I guess that's the
Yeah.
best way to
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm feeling that. So I'm going to give a shout out to Arizona. I'm going to give a shout out to Phoenix. Okay. I'm going to give it. I love it. I'm going to give a shout out to Trainual and a shout out to documentation. So the very first thing is that you have to be able to document everything. You have to kind of convert into a documentation culture. And I think that is the biggest struggle. Like when you really think about why are organizations not going all in with remote, it's around trust,
Mm.
right? It's around like measuring performance. How do we know if people like those are the questions that people are, how do we know that people are working? All of these things, if you want to really zoom out, it comes down to documentation slash like transparency. So if you can, I love this example. Back in the day, I heard Darren Murph. Shout out to Darren Murph. And it was when he was at GitLab, and I remember he was presenting somewhere and he was talking about how he responds. And it's funny because I sent him a message and I sent him a question, and he responds to a question with a link. That's how ingrained GitLab has in documentation is that they want you to respond to questions with a link. If somebody asks you a question and that information is not available, they want you to go into the documentation, add the question, and then add the answer, and then send the person the link. And the reason why it's so important is because when you're distributed and you're fully remote, the frustration comes, and there's a couple HBR articles out there about some of the biggest frustrations of new employees. It's how quickly they can get the answers to their question.
Mm.
So you're a new developer. I'm sorry, I'm just going to stay in the developer zone because that's where we at sometimes.
Yeah.
But you're a new developer and you need to know what are the coding standards for this new company. And you're like, hey, what do I do? And you put a question in Slack. You can't move on until someone answers your question.
Exactly.
And then for every minute that goes by that you're not getting your answer, the anxiety is coming up. And then you're starting to, maybe even as a manager, right? Like you're starting to build more distrust because it's like, hey, I asked this question, you're not getting the work done. So I would say number one is trying to become like instituting a documentation culture is by far the most important number one. And then number two, I'll just give two really big tips. The documentation one kind of sums up everything. Like, how are you going to manage performance? How are you going to communicate? How are you all of those things we'll just put on the documentation.
Yeah.
The other thing as a new company doing remote work is social connections. I talk a lot about this. This is probably the topic I talk the most about when it comes to remote work. And it's the idea, at Blend, we divide connections into three major buckets: professional connections, your colleagues, professional associations, your mentors, etc. Lifestyle connections, I like to mountain bike, maybe some
Yeah.
swimming, maybe a little hoops or something like that. Something, I don't know. And even just your friends, maybe you like to go out to the bar and just have a few beverages. So those are your lifestyle connections, right? But then there's intimate, last but not least, intimate. And this is where a lot of people feel very uncomfortable when I'm talking about
Ooh.
intimate connections at the workplace. Stay out my sheets, son. Stay out my sheets. But the reality is when you ask people, and I love asking this during my talks, how many of someone that met their significant other at their job? And it's a lot. most people raise their hand.
Wow.
In addition to romantic relationships, there's also other intimate connections. We put religion as an intimate connection because that's a real personal, intimate thing. And then even politics. It gets really emotional, and it's the reason why it gets so emotional is because that's a really intimate relationship that you may have politically. So as an employer, if connections, and there's a lot of research out there, like things that involve connection and collaborating are the biggest challenges of remote work. When you hear leaders say our culture's not great, they're literally saying our connection's not great because culture's a very complicated thing. Like I always tell people, like, look, culture's not the ping pong table. It's a million different things. So what they're saying, what most people believe, oh, I want to go into the office. Even you said, like, I want to go into the office. Like, I really need to change the scenery. But you're going in the office for connection.
Yeah.
So as an
That's true.
employer, if connection's a big challenge, you have to design what we call a social connection strategy. You have to be intentional that you're providing these opportunities for your employees to connect, and not just connect professionally, connect with lifestyle and connect with intimate connections as well. Yeah, those two things, documentation culture and a social connection strategy.
You whacked two questions in one because I was going to talk about challenges, right, with navigating remote work. But thank you so much for sharing that. Remote work often blurs the lines between the personal, the private, and work stuff, right? You've heard the joke probably that says, do I live at work or do I work at home? Which is it? And depending on the day, it feels like either or of those. But what are some ways, some healthy ways to try to find balance where you don't feel like you're working all the time because you're async, Slack, and all of that, or feel like at work you're always thinking about home, oh crap, I got to go do laundry, right? So what does that look like for you, for those thinking through that?
I love this question because I just feel like work-life balance, I feel like that's the question that you're asking me. How can you balance work and life when they're quote unquote blending together? No pun intended. We actually believe you can't. So at Blend, we don't use the phrase work-life balance. We use work-life integration.
Because
interesting. The reality is you are one being, and it's very difficult to split yourself into a personal being and a work being. It's impossible, really. And I think I don't love everything that Gary Vee says, but I feel like I saw this clip and it was really interesting. When his work-life balance is bullshit. It's not even a real thing because in a weird way, when you say the word balance, I think most people think like the yin and the yang are actually equal. I think most people think equal, although I had this debate where a balance doesn't actually necessarily mean equal. Like a balance it could be different, but I think most people think when you say balance, they think equal. And I love the Gary Vee clip because he was like, I feel like work-life balance is bullshit because it sets us up for failure. Like the example you gave, right? Oh, I'm working on this task, but then I got to go do laundry. Those are both tasks that human needs to complete. So if I'm working on something and I'm down there coding and something hits my mind, oh, let me go do laundry. There's a reason why. Maybe you need to take a break from coding. Like your body tells you what to do at times. Like when your mind starts wandering, it's probably because your mind's sick of concentrating on that one thing for so long. So we actually don't have any suggestions for that. Of course, you got to get your work done. And there are some productivity hacks, which I'll leave out there to all the productivity people. But on our side, what we say is embrace that integration. That's why you want to work remote. You want the flexibility and the control over when you do your work, how you do your work, and what fits your day for you that day. So yeah, I know I didn't answer your question, but I just loved it because I feel like sometimes we're way too hard on ourselves. Kind of going back to that Gary Vee comment of when you say work-life balance, is it even achievable? And then let's just say you work 90 hours because you have to work 90 hours that week for a client or whatever. Are you beating yourself up now? Are you now feeling guilty that you might have not have spent some time with your little one as much as possible?
Yeah.
Oh, but by the way, because you did that 90 hours, now you can work the following week for 15 or 20 hours and hang out with your little one for even more times. I think it's just a situation of how can you integrate your life with work versus how can I split it because we're a being and we're one person.
Dude, that is awesome. I really love that paradigm shift, right? Thinking about it a little differently than the balance equation. complex
You can't.
complex equation.
Yeah.
I really
The
like
one
that.
thing I will comment on though about is that because somebody mentioned this at an event that I was speaking at recently, they said they felt like they're working a lot because they are integrated. So it can feel like you've been working for a 20-hour day or a 15-hour day because you started a task in the morning you got on a Teams or a Slack meeting or whatever. Then you stopped, did some laundry, started again, did some work. Then you decided to go to the grocery store real quick, came back, did some work. But now it's 4 o'clock, but you have to do some task at 7 o'clock because you've integrated all day. So you at the end of the day, like, oh my gosh, I've been working till 7. The challenge is when you integrate, you really do have to reflect on your day. And you have to really think about what did I do today overall, not just work, because it can feel, Anivia, it's a psychology thing. Like it can feel like I just worked until 7 o'clock. I got up at 8 and it's 7 o'clock and I just closed my laptop. But a lot of times you forget what you integrated during the day with your personal life. So that is a little bit tricky. I think reflection, taking a
Yeah.
moment at the end of the day and just thinking about what you achieved as a human being that day is really
Yeah.
important.
100. And for me, that's part of the impetus. Like I'm building out a Chrome extension called Self Focus, and it helps
Mhm.
block Pomodoro technique, like small time chunks and stuff. And you
Yep.
could create a list for things. And there's a gazillion tools that help do this, but that's the idea. So you can look back. So regardless of how integrated your day was, and you did a bunch of things, right? You can look back and say, oh, I checked these 6 boxes. I got these things done. And it's a little easier to look back and reflect and see the goals that you accomplished versus thinking at the end of the day, I'm trying to think, oh crap, what did I do at 9 a.m.? That was so long
Yeah.
ago. So you can plan that out more and then, reflect on it to see what you got done. And eventually it's going to have
That's a good idea.
analytics and all of that stuff to even help you work
It'd
more
be cool
efficiently.
if you tag each activity as business, personal, family,
Yeah.
because I think that's a huge challenge when you're talking about work-life integration. And that is a feeling because like when you look at the statistics, a lot of some of the biggest challenges, I think Buffer's State of Remote Work, shout out to Buffer. One of the biggest challenges are being able to unplug and working too much. Those two together are a significant amount. And I think you have to play these games with yourself and revisit your thinking. If you are integrating during the day, you're not fully working all day.
Yeah.
I can see how the day feels longer because you did integrate. Your day feels longer, but before you drove to an office,
Yeah.
did a whole day of stuff in that chunk. And I think the drive and the commute and the location helps your psychology of separating, of thinking
Very
about your
true.
day as two separate things, right?
Yeah.
In this case, because you're integrating, your brain's not feeling the commute there. The location's not different, right? So you're not feeling that difference. So I think it's just important to take breaks, get outside, go for walks, and then reflect on, hey, I did my laundry today. That was great. I cooked a
Yeah.
little dinner today. I did that huge redesign. Damn, I made it to my child's soccer game. Ooh, it's 8 o'clock at night, but today was a great day. And actually, you know what? I did more. Maybe today I did more stuff with my family than I did for work when I look at it.
Yeah. I really like that. What are some cool things Blend Me Inc. is cooking up that if you want to share for folks listening, and I'll put links also, by the way, to the show notes.
Yeah. I think obviously the Remotely One podcast, you got to check that out. That's really exciting. As far as Blend is concerned, we are definitely ramping up our team a little bit. So we're looking for contract consultants to help our clients on a fractional basis. I think that's a big change in our business model. We started that business model in 2020, but helping small businesses with on demand, and part time HR fractional leadership is something that we're really getting into. If you're a consultant out there, if you're a people ops professional that wants more control of your day and wants to work fully remotely, take a look at our website and take a look at the ad that we have out on LinkedIn.
Let's go. Thank you so much again,
Let's
Kaleem,
go.
once again for hopping on with me. And it's always a pleasure collaborating with you. And I'm super stoked for the years to come.
Likewise, man. Appreciate you. Peace.